My baby came back from my ML's house dehydrated and weak. When I confronted her, she dismissively said, "It's not my job to keep track of how much water he drinks." My response left her pleading to fix things. I never thought I'd be the type of person to get revenge, but when it comes to my child, I'll go to war. I'm 31 female, married to my husband Mark, 33 male, and we have a beautiful 18-month-old son, Ben. We live in Austin, Texas, and for the most part, life is good. Except for one thing, my mother-in-law, Deborah. Deborah has never liked me. From the moment Mark and I started dating, she made it clear I wasn't the one for him. She thought I was too independent, too opinionated, too different from what she had in mind for her perfect son. When I got pregnant, she acted excited, but it was fake. I knew it. Mark knew it. She wanted control, and when I didn't give it to her, she started treating me like I was just an incubator. When Ben was born, it only got worse. She ignored my rules. Fed him things I specifically said no to. Undermined me every chance she got. And if I called her out, she'd pull the "I raised kids, I think I know what I'm doing" card. I gritted my teeth and tolerated her. For Mark. For peace. Until she did something that crossed a line I can never forgive. A couple of months ago, Mark and I were invited to a wedding in Houston. No kids allowed. My parents, who usually watched Ben, were on a cruise, so that left Deborah as our only option. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed not to leave him with her, but Mark reassured me. He said she wouldn't have a choice but to follow my rules. I went over everything with her in painful detail. Ben needs water frequently. He's a toddler. He doesn't always ask. He follows a strict nap schedule or he becomes miserable. No sugary foods. No juice. Water only. Limit screen time. Do not stick him in front of a TV for hours. She smiled and nodded. Too quickly. I should have listened to my gut. We were gone 2 days. When we picked Ben up Sunday night, something was wrong. He was lethargic. Normally, when he sees me, he runs up giggling, arms out, babbling in excitement. But this time, he didn't even lift his head. His little lips were chapped. His skin felt warm. When I picked him up, he collapsed against my shoulder like he didn't have the energy to hold himself up. My heart stopped. "Why does he look like this?" I asked. Deborah waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, he was just playing a lot." Mark's face drained of color. "Mom, did you give him water?" Her response? "It's not my job to keep track of how much water he drinks." She smirked. Like it was funny. Like I was being dramatic. I don't even remember what I said next. I just remember grabbing Ben and walking out. I drove straight to the emergency room. Mark sat in the back seat, holding Ben, panic written all over his face. I called ahead to let them know we were coming. The moment we walked in, a nurse took one look at Ben and rushed us to a room. They checked him over, gave him fluids, and ran tests. The doctor came back and told me he's dehydrated. Not severe enough for N4, but if you had waited much longer, it could have been. I wanted to throw up. I sobbed into Mark's chest. My baby, my perfect little boy, was suffering because of that woman. And she didn't even care. Mark was shaking with anger. "I'm going to kill her." I wiped my face. "No. I've got this." And that's when I decided. If she wanted to act like her pride mattered more than Ben's health, then she was about to learn how dangerous her arrogance really was. The next morning, I sent one text to the family group chat. "Just a heads up, Ben was hospitalized for dehydration after staying with MIL." She said, "It's not my job to keep track of how much water he drinks. If she offers to babysit your kids, proceed with caution." Deborah freaked out. She called screaming, accusing me of trying to ruin her reputation. "You did that yourself," I said and hung up. Then I made the next move. Deborah lives in a fancy HOA neighborhood, you know, the kind where they fine you for having the wrong shade of beige on your house. I did some digging and found out her HOA has strict childcare regulations. If you want to watch kids overnight, even your grandkids, you have to register and meet certain safety standards. I filed a formal complaint. 2 weeks later, she got slapped with a $2,500 fine and had to attend a mandatory safety training course. She called Mark crying. He told her, "You almost killed my son." She kept wailing, saying she didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't done. Deborah works part-time at a local preschool. She loves to brag about it, acting like she's the child expert in the family. Well, guess what? In Texas, child care workers are mandatory reporters. If they witness neglect or, committed themselves, they can face serious consequences. I filed a formal complaint with the licensing board, attaching Ben's medical report from the hospital. It took a week. She was fired. She called me begging to fix it. I let it go to voicemail. It's been 6 months. She hasn't seen Ben. No pictures. No updates. Nothing. She's tried apologizing. She's tried sending gifts. She even showed up at our house crying, begging to see Ben. I just stood in the doorway and said, apology not accepted. Now, every time she sees a picture of Ben from other family members, she cries. And honestly, I sleep just fine. After Deborah got fired, I expected her to lay low for a while. Maybe reflect. Maybe, I don't know, take accountability for almost killing her grandson. But no, that woman doubled down. She went on a smear campaign. First, she tried to turn the family against me. She told everyone I was exaggerating what happened, saying, Ben was a little thirsty, that's all. She's making it sound like I left him in the desert for a week. Then she told them I was controlling and was trying to cut a loving grandmother out of her grandson's life. Mark's cousin, Rachel, called me. She's telling people you made it all up to punish her. Oh, really? I said. Want me to send you Ben's hospital report? She went quiet. Deborah hadn't counted on the fact that I keep receipts. I sent a mass email to the entire family. Since Deborah is telling people I made this up, here are the facts. Ben was taken to the ER for dehydration after staying with her. She told us it's not my job to track how much water he drinks. The doctor confirmed he was dehydrated and needed immediate fluids. Instead of apologizing, she is lying. If you still think I'm exaggerating, I suggest you check your priorities. Deborah lost a lot of support that day. But she wasn't done. A few weeks later, we got a letter in the mail. From a lawyer. I ripped it open, my hands shaking. It was a petition for grandparent visitation rights. I laughed out loud. Mark, come look at this. He grabbed the papers, read them, then muttered, she's lost her damn mind. I called her immediately. Are you actually suing us for visitation? Her voice was smug. You're keeping my grandson from me. That's parental alienation. I could feel my pulse in my throat. You neglected him. That's not what a judge will see. And that's when I realized she wasn't just delusional. She was dangerous. If she was willing to go to court, that meant she truly believed she had a right to Ben. I wasn't just fighting off an annoying MIL anymore. I was fighting for my child. I called a lawyer the next day. Thankfully, in Texas, grandparents don't have automatic visitation rights. They have to prove that they've had a significant role in the child's life. That being cut off would cause the child actual harm. She had zero case. But that didn't mean she wouldn't drag us through hell trying. Deborah fabricated evidence. She tried to claim she had been Ben's primary babysitter since birth. She showed fake text messages as proof that I had begged her to help raise him. Mark and I had to pull phone records to prove she was lying. She even tried to use her own firing against me, telling the judge I had gotten her blacklisted from working with kids, so now she couldn't even find a job. The judge wasn't buying any of it. He was, however, furious when he realized she faked text messages. He warned her, if you continue making false claims, I will hold you in contempt of court. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. After she lost her case, I thought she'd finally leave us alone. Then I started seeing her car. Everywhere. At the grocery store. Near our daycare. Parked down the street from our house. I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. Until one day, I caught her taking pictures of Ben at the park. I walked straight up to her. What are you doing? She smiled like nothing was wrong. I just miss him. I snatched her phone out of her hand before she could react. Scrolled through her gallery. Dozens of pictures. Not just from today. She had been following us for weeks. I turned to Mark, shaking. We need a restraining order. We got a temporary restraining order against her the next day. She was furious. Then, 2 nights later, we woke up at 2 a.m. to our security alarm going off. Mark grabbed a baseball bat and ran to the door. I grabbed Ben and locked myself in the nursery. When the cops arrived, they found Deborah standing in our backyard, holding a stuffed bear and a box of Ben's favorite snacks. She looked at the officers like they were the crazy ones. I just wanted to leave him a gift. She was arrested for trespassing. I wish I could say that was the end. But I have a feeling this isn't over yet. Deborah's arrest should have been the end of it. It should have been the moment she realized she had gone too far. But people like her? They don't learn. She was released the next morning. No charges were filed because technically, she hadn't broken into our house, just trespassed. The cops told her to stay away. She nodded, acted apologetic. Then she went straight to Mark's workplace. She walked right into the lobby of his office, mascara streaked down her cheeks, crying to his boss about how we were abusing her by keeping her from her grandson. She's controlling him, she sobbed. My son wouldn't cut me off like this. His wife is forcing him. Mark was called into HR. His boss pulled him into a private office. Your mother is in the lobby, and she's very upset. She says you've been manipulated into filing a restraining order against her. Should we call security? Mark was humiliated. Livid. He stormed downstairs, grabbed his mother by the arm, and dragged her outside. "What are you doing?" he snapped. She clutched his face, her voice desperate. "You don't see it, Mark. She's turned you against me. You're my son, not hers." Mark yanked away. "That's my wife. That's the mother of my child. And you," his voice broke, thick with rage. "You almost killed Ben." The words hit her like a slap. For a split second, I saw it in her eyes. Fear, regret, maybe even guilt. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. Mark stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is why you lost everything," he said. And he walked away. She screamed after him, "I did nothing wrong." But he never turned back. Deborah wasn't done. She had lost her job. She had lost our family support. But she still had her social circle. She had spent years building her reputation in her fancy HOA community, playing the part of a doting grandmother, the wise, experienced woman who helped struggling young mothers. And she thought she could use them to turn the tide. So, she called for a neighborhood meeting. She gathered as many people as she could. Other mothers, church friends, even some old coworkers from the preschool. I wasn't invited. But Rachel, Mark's cousin, tipped me off. "She's telling everyone you made up the hospital thing to cut her out of Ben's life," Rachel texted me. "She's playing the victim hard." That's when I made a decision. I was done playing defense. I showed up. I walked straight into that meeting with a folder of documents in my hand. Deborah was mid-sentence, telling a room full of women how I was vindictive and jealous of her bond with Ben. The second she saw me, her face drained of color. I walked up to the front, looked her dead in the eyes, and dropped Ben's hospital records on the table. "Read it," I said. The room fell dead silent. One of the women hesitantly picked up the papers. This is a medical report," she murmured, reading. "It says Ben was dehydrated, that he needed emergency fluids." Deborah's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I turned to the group. "She didn't give my son water for 2 days. When we confronted her, she said, 'It's not my job to track how much water he drinks.'" A few people gasped. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Deborah snapped. "This is an attack," she shrieked. "She's turning all of you against me. I raised my kids just fine." A woman in the back, one of her oldest friends, shook her head. "We trusted you with our children, Deborah." And just like that, her last bit of support crumbled. Deborah tried one last stunt. She sent a long, dramatic letter to Mark and me, saying she was moving away. She claimed we had destroyed her life, that we had robbed her of her family, and that one day, Ben would hate us for keeping him from her. Mark read it once, then threw it in the trash. She left a week later. We don't know where she went. We don't care. She has no phone number, no address, no social media. It's like she disappeared. And for the first time in years, we could breathe. For a long time, I struggled with guilt. I kept wondering, should I have given her another chance? But then I'd look at Ben, my sweet, happy, thriving little boy. And I knew, some people can't be saved. Some people choose pride over love. And when they do, you have to let them go.